What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to the latest edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez, and today we actually look at some other contracts around the league and what that means for some key contributors in green and white. Listen, if you've been watching Jets Latest, and thank you to everybody who's liked and subscribed, you know one of the things I've been saying about this new regime and their approach about getting young guys with talent, building a young core, and letting them develop together. Well, there is no bigger examples of that than two literally offensive and defensive rookies of the year that are on their roster, right? And I'm talking about Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. And listen, there are deals out there in the market in the NFL which are certainly impacting our guys. First up is Sauce. And let me tell you something. That's why it says Sauce inflation, because there are defensive back deals around the league that are very intriguing as it relates to Sauce. First of all, Darryl Stingley Jr., he got a 3-year, $90 million extension yesterday. That is a huge deal. It is one of the biggest contracts all time for someone on the defensive side of the ball. And also just last week, Carolina Panthers stud cornerback J.C. Horn, he signed a 4-year, $100 million extension. So the price for elite cornerbacks is going up. I mean, and it makes sense. As we evolve into a passing league, right? And I've said this when it relates to draft picks and free agents as well. The premier positions on the field on the defensive side of the ball are edge rusher to get pressure on the quarterback and cornerback to be able to, shut down number one wide receivers. Those are the positions that are starting to generate more dollars, quite frankly. These are the guys that are getting the bag. While on the offensive side, it's clearly the quarterbacks. Then it's your stud wideouts, and it's your offensive linemen that can protect the quarterback, right? So the J.C. Horn deal, the Stingley deal, the fact that, say, Patrick Surtain was the defensive player of the year. Cornerbacks are getting more notoriety, and here's the deal. Sauce fits right in with those young, elite all-pro corners. I mean, Stingley was good. He was an all-pro once. He was a Pro Bowler once. But guess what? Sauce has been an all-pro twice in his career. And quite frankly, the only two players that were all-pro their first 2 years ever on the defensive side of the ball were Lawrence Taylor and Micah Parsons, right? So Sauce clearly should command that same kind of number. And the only thing I say is the Jets need to kind of lock these guys up sooner rather than later, because the price will just keep on escalating every time a new premier cornerback has to sign an extension or sign a deal. It's just going to reset the market even higher. You saw Horn, $25 million a year. Now Stingley, $30 million a year. There's going to be Surtain out there looking for an extension, and Sauce as well. I think it behooves Darren Mosey and the Jets to go ahead and get the deal with Sauce done as soon as possible before resetting the market just keeps on going. And here's the deal. I told you about our defensive rookie of the year. The same, I think, can be said for our former offensive rookie of the year. I'm talking about Garrett Wilson. Look at Cincinnati. What the Bengals did over the weekend reset the market at the wide receiver position. Jamar Chase signed a 4-year, $161 million contract. That is the biggest deal ever in the NFL for someone that was not a quarterback. 4 years and over $160 million. We are talking over $40 million a year. Now you may say, Speeds, Garrett Wilson's not going to get Jamar Chase money. And that may be true. I refer you to what else Cincinnati did, signing their number 2 wide receiver, T. Higgins, to a 4-year, $115 million deal. That's about $29 million a year. T. Higgins is a very good wide receiver. T. Higgins is one of the best number 2 wide receivers on his team in the entire National Football League, okay? But here's what T. Higgins did last year. 73 catches, 911 yards, and 10 touchdowns, right? In fantasy, for example, he was wide receiver, I think, number 17 or 18. Garrett Wilson has been more productive than T. Higgins. Wilson has averaged 93 catches, over 1,000 yards, 5 or 6 touchdowns in his first couple of years in the league. He has consistently been, if we talk about fantasy, let's say, a top 15 fantasy asset. I say that because it is reasonable to expect Garrett Wilson to want a deal bigger than T. Higgins. He's not going to get the $40 million that Jamar Chase is getting, right? fair enough. But I do think he can command just as much money as T. Higgins, if not more. So we're talking about 30 million plus, really the same thing that the elite cornerbacks got, right? So again, just like what was the case with Sauce Gardner, I think it behooves the Jets to go ahead and sign up Garrett Wilson as soon as they possibly can. Remember, the Jets have made a bunch of moves in free agency, but they still have $32 plus million in cap space, right? And so I think they got to use some of it now on Sauce, on Garrett Wilson, before the price continues to grow. You want to build this young core, there's no better place to start with our former offensive rookie of the year and our former defensive rookie of the year. So that's kind of what I think. But also, the Jets have still remained busy. I want to catch you up on some of the moves they've made in special teams. Like we've been talking about old linemen they've gotten, guys in the secondary. What I think is interesting is Aaron Glenn and Darren Mosey, they are doing this across the board, even in special teams. So here's a couple that I want to let you guys know about. There's a kick returner that the Jets signed to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal named Kene Ngwanu. Okay, he was with us last year. I don't know if you remember in the game against Seattle, he had a 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. He was named AFC Special Teams Player of the Week. And then he got hurt the next week and he was out for the rest of the season. But he fits the mold, guys. 27 years old. We've been talking about guys in their mid to upper 20s. He is a former all-pro kick returner. Obviously has flashes on tape like we have talked about, okay? His career kickoff return average is 28.7. Guess what? That is fourth best all time. And let me tell you something. You might be like, so what? Kickoff returners, they come a dime a dozen. Well, no, they don't, okay? Like you said, he's an all-pro. We saw him take one to the house against Seattle. He has a great career average. Here's the other thing. In about 2 weeks, the NFL is going to be meeting the rules committee, and there is a rule suggestion out there. If you know right now, the kickoffs with that weird kickoff zone, landing zone that's been happening last year, there is a proposal out there. Touchbacks last year would have the team start at the 30-yard line. There is a proposed rule change to have touchbacks this upcoming year start at the 35-yard line. And what I think is the kind of thrust, the reason for that, is the NFL is looking to increase the rate of kickoffs that actually get returned. It went up from 21.8% a couple years ago to 32.8% last year. They are looking for the kickoff to be a play where there are actual returns. They changed where they lined up to kind of reduce the injury risk and all that stuff, but they do acknowledge that the kickoff is one of the more exciting plays in all of football. They want more returns, and this potential rule change may inspire teams to, instead of trying to kick touchbacks, to actually let the return man get it, because the penalty would be starting their drive at the 35 instead of the 30, making having a top-notch returner all the more interesting and important. So I think that is a shrewd move to bring back a former all-pro returner who we saw have success with us last year. The other special teams move is a guy named Chris Boyd, who was on special teams, was also a cornerback, but really is a playmaker on special teams. Again, 28 years old to a 1-year deal. He was at Texas, where he was a kind of a stud cornerback in college, has that kind of pedigree, but he's really a special teamers. Aaron Glenn knows him well. Why? Because Aaron Glenn was a cornerback at the University of Texas back in the day. Now, if you look up Chris Boyd, one of the things you are going to see is videotape of, in a playoff game against Kansas City, him coming onto the sidelines and shoving his coach. I want to demystify that right now, because plenty of people out there are being like, oh, this is a bad character guy. This guy is a problem. We don't want him. Let me tell you something. After that game, even though that footage was out there, head coach DeMeco Ryans, Boyd himself, everybody said it was not that he was frustrated and angry with the coach, okay? What happened was he made a play. He knocked the ball loose, and then he thought that the Texans had recovered a fumble on the return, okay? He was hyped up. He was like, yeah! That's what he was actually doing. He was not mad at his coach. DeMeco Ryans said that. Here's the quote. I think it was more that he was fired up and he thought he made a play to help us. So that narrative that he's pushing a coach, that is incorrect. That's what the head coach said after it. What did Boyd say after that? I thought I had forced the fumble and I was turned up. Okay? So again, This is a special teams guy that can make plays. I think he led the team on special teams tackles with Houston last year, and Aaron Glenn knows him from Texas. Okay, so I do want to clarify that idea that this recent signing on special teams is somehow some kind of problem guy for the New York Jets. That is not the case. They get a special teams tackling stud, they get a returner, and if you're listening, Moji and Glenn, you need to lock up Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner as soon as possible because the price will just keep going up. That'll do it for this edition of Jets Latest. But remember, like these videos, subscribe so you get all the information when I go live here on Jets Latest. And as always, if you want to get more from me, Dane Martinez, the Spittin' Statistician, I am also the host over on Sirius XM on the Fantasy Channel, Channel 87 of the FTN Fantasy Show. FTN is a great data fantasy site giving you all sorts of rankings, all sorts of tools, all sorts of ways to help you win your leagues and win that cash. And I host their radio show on Sirius XM. You can also follow me at Spittin' Speeds. Hit me up with any questions you have, but really, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell a friend to tell a friend, because this is the way you get the latest on the JETS Jets. We'll be back tomorrow with more news on the green and white. But other than that, have a great day. We out of here. Peace.